Welcome to Psychic Insights, where pop culture meets higher consciousness and the tea is always a little bit mystical. I'm Robin Richardson, your psychic girlfriend, and around here we don't just watch the drama unfold, we read the energy behind it, whether it's celebrity scandals, reality TV, chaos, or true crime with a twist. I'm tuning in to bring you the intuitive scoop the headlines miss. So buckle up, because your aura's about to get entertained. Welcome back to my channel. It's Robin Richardson, your psychic girlfriend, and thank you for supporting my work and liking and subscribing. I appreciate it. It helps me out. I've been playing with the the flu this week, so it was such a treat again to listen to Love Trapped, the podcast, and this was episode 4. I am the anonymous woman. And there was a moment when I literally paused this episode, because something about this story suddenly shifted. And up until now, the situation involving Clayton Echard felt like a confusing, messy conflict between two people. But in episode 4, something happens that changes the entire psychological landscape. And the moment it happens, you can feel the story turning, not into a misunderstanding, but possibly a pattern. And you know me, I love my patterns. So before we walk through this episode, I actually pulled cards asking a simple question. What energy is surrounding this moment in the story? And the cards came out fascinating, as usual. All right, so we'll go over them. I pulled the moon, because I know you love it. Cross. Let's see. Bear. Birds. Tower. Child. Book. Key. Rider. And then I pulled a clarifier of the house. All right. And if you follow my channel for a while, you know that Lenormand spreads often tell a story. And what amazed me is that the spread almost mirrors the structure of episode 4 itself. So as we walk through the episode, I'm going to show you how each of these cards connects to what actually unfolded in the story. So one of the things in episode 4 that captures is the moment when the story goes from private conversations to public attention. And once the situation reaches the press, everything changes. Because when something goes public, reputation suddenly becomes part of the story. And that's exactly what the moon reflects. Reputation, how people are seen by others. And once the situation reaches a level of visibility, the emotional pressure multiplies. And what I found interesting is that Laura fighting with people on the Reddit, trying to convince people about her story, sending information to the Sun, and just how she's trying to protect her story, her reputation, right? So once this situation reaches a level of visibility, again, the emotional level just starts, the pressure just increases. It multiplies. And this is where the next card comes in. It's the cross, right? And the cross represents a burden, pressure, emotional weight. And the combination with the moon and the cross together is exactly what happens when a story begins affecting someone's public identity. Clayton. Okay. So the episode reaches one of its most pivotal moments. Clayton receives a direct message. And when he reads it, he realizes that something changes. He realizes that something has now changed the entire situation and how he understands it. He might not be the only one. And up until that point, Clayton believed the experience he had was isolated.
But when another person reaches out suggesting something similar happened to them, the story shifts dramatically. Suddenly, the question isn't about what happened between two people. The question becomes, could there be a pattern here? And once the story reaches the internet, in the public, something fascinating happens. The internet starts connecting the dots. Commentators like Neal, and I was following Neal like at the time, still. And what I value about Dave is his ability to ask questions, not take things at face value, have a balanced perspective, have a different perspective sometimes. And I really appreciated that. So I feel like cosmically he was tapped to bring this story forward. And also Reality Steve, because they started discussing this situation publicly. And both of them have spent years covering the Bachelor world. So when the story began circulating online, audiences naturally turned to them for context. But what made their coverage interesting is they didn't simply repeat the narrative. They started asking questions, looking at timelines, comparing claims, examining the details. And when people begin comparing timelines and testing stories against evidence, patterns sometimes began appearing where they weren't visible at first, which brings us to the next card in the spread. Oh, that's not it. Where are the birds? Birds. And the birds represent conversations, analysis, people exchanging information. In modern terms, the birds often show up when stories start spreading online and when people begin comparing notes. And that's exactly what's happening. And the next card in this spread is bear. And the bear often represents power struggles, control, escalation. And that made me think about something psychologists often talk about in high conflict relationship dynamics. What happens when someone experiences rejection? For most people, rejection is painful but manageable. And sometimes rejection can trigger something deeper, a sense of humiliation, loss of control. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as the narcissistic injury. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone has a narcissistic personality disorder. It simply means that their sense of identity may be strongly tied to external validation. And we see this in both Laura and Clayton. Clayton has admitted, needing that external validation. And Laura, it seems like that's all she's seeking. So when rejection happens, it just doesn't feel disappointing. It feels like an attack on their identity. And when that kind of emotional injury occurs, sometimes people respond by trying to regain control. One way people sometimes try to regain control is by attempting to reshape the narrative. Sometimes it means portraying themselves as a victim. Sometimes it involves attacking the other person's reputation. And psychologists refer to this dynamic as devaluation or a smear campaign. We've heard this from Laura's parents, right? And again, I'm not saying that that's what's happening here. Allegedly. But when you listen to episode 4 and observe how the conflict escalates, it raises fascinating questions about how people respond to rejection and loss of control. And as the internet conversation grows, something else begins happening behind the scenes. The legal system enters the story. And one firm involved in the situation is Woodnick Law. And what makes that detail especially interesting, it's the same firm that had also been involved in an earlier situation with Laura Owens involving Greg Gillespie. So now the public conversation intersects with the legal history, which brings us next to the tower. And the tower represents institutions. If you've been watching this channel, you know this. It's the court. It's the legal system. It's authority. And when the tower appears in a reading, it often indicates a situation is moving into formal processes. And one of our little stars of the show, which I love, is Deandra. And her entrance into the story stands out to me because legal professionals like Deandra operate in a completely different environment than internet discussions. Online conversations move quickly. Legal work moves slowly and deliberately. And attorneys focus on documents, evidence, timelines. And once a situation enters that process, the emphasis shifts from speculation to verification. What I love about Deandra is she felt the need. She felt that calling to help. Even though Woodnick Law has had experience with Laura, which hasn't been, shall we say, easy or positive. All right. And then we come to the most interesting combinations in the spread. And we've got the book and the key. And the book represents hidden information, secrets. Whenever I see this card, I'm like, oh, something's coming out. Something is going to be revealed. And the key represents truth, a revelation. And when these two appear together, they often signal a moment when hidden information begins unlocking a larger picture. And in episode 4, it feels like that moment, when the pieces of the story start connecting in ways they didn't before. And another card in the spread that turned out was the child. And the child often represents something that began small, something that seemed simple at first, but grew into something much larger. Sometimes situations that start privately can evolve into public controversies that no one expected. Now, the final cards in my spread were the rider and the house. Okay, the rider and the house. The rider represents incoming news, developments, information that hasn't surfaced yet. The house represents foundations, reputation, personal stability, and when these cards appear together, they often suggest that future developments could continue affecting people's lives in significant ways, meaning this story may not be finished unfolding. So, listening to episode 4, 3 questions kept coming to mind for me. When did people around the situation begin noticing a possible pattern? And second, what role did the internet investigators play in bringing key details to the surface? And 3, what information has not yet been revealed? Because stories like this often evolve over time as new pieces of the puzzle emerge. And we see this in the story, right? But in this episode of Love Trapped, it captures a fascinating turning point where private story becomes public, the internet begins asking questions, legal structures begin engaging, and hidden information starts surfacing. And when those forces collide, stories often evolve in ways no one expected. I'd like to know your thoughts. What stood out for you most in episode 4? The direct message that Clayton received? The role the internet played in connecting the dots? Or the moment the possibility of a pattern entered the conversation? Let me know in the comments section. I always read them and I enjoy it. And thank you so much for being respectful and kind in my comments section. It gives me hope for humanity, especially during this really rough, situation that Clayton is going through and all the players involved. I am so glad that this podcast has been produced. It's been so good to hear it from the perspective of Clayton and the other players in this story. And again, thank you so much for liking, subscribing, and ringing that bell and commenting. I will see you in the next one because I am truly, truly enjoying this podcast. And let me know what you think. I'll see you in the next one.